Greetings, cultured viewers, and welcome to another episode of Roll Off a Tangent. I'm Robert Gibson, alias Zendexor, and my colleagues are Nikita Zuev and XJ. As usual, we will be discussing a story. But before we launch into that, you may wish to note that we shall have an opportunity at the end of the podcast to examine an instance of feedback from publishers, since XJ has recently been vouchsafed a sample of that valuable phenomenon. And now for the main course in today's literary feast, which focuses upon one of the tales in Robert Heinlein's renowned 5-volume Future History series. It's a short story, only 10 pages, but packed with colour and incident, and written unusually in the style of the kind of magazine article you might expect to see in a weekend newspaper supplement. If to this I add that it's an imaginary biographical sketch, Heinlein's fans will no doubt guess its title. The Green Hills of Earth recounts the career and the death of Rhysling, the blind singer of the Spaceways, a legend in his own lifetime and after. Rhysling begins his career as a jetman, one whose perilous task it is to tend the atomic motors of the ships that ply the spacelanes. In the rough and ready early years of exploration, when the average life expectancy of spacemen was short. The documentary-style narrator looks back on that time from a safer and more civilized culture. So, in addition to a character study, the story gives us a portrait of an age in transition, all in just 10 pages, remember? And the contrast between now and then provides a balance of gains and losses. To quote from the story, "The crew signed releases for everything in those days. A Lloyd's associate would have laughed in your face at the notion of insuring a spaceman. The Space Precautionary Act had never been heard of, and the company was responsible only for wages if and when. Half the ships that went further than Lunar City never came back. Spacemen did not care." And another quote, "Jetmen were the most carefree of the lot and the meanest. Jetmen knew too much. The others trusted the skill of the captain to get them down safely. Jetmen knew that skill was useless against the blind and fitful devils chained inside their rocket motors." The narrator alludes to Rhysling's unruly early escapades and clashes with authority, then recounts the incident which blinded him and left him apparently without hope, scratching a living among the colonists on Mars with his singing and accordion-playing, and then describes the remarkable change which comes over his fortunes. His blindness, in one important respect, turns out to be an asset, because it allows his imagination to roam more freely and his verses to evolve from bawdy doggerel into real poetry. This is particularly lucky insofar as the times are changing and the old Martian architecture is being disfigured by Terran development. Rhysling can't see what is happening, and so he is able to immortalize lost beauty in his verse. And to quote again, variously, "The subtle change in his orientation which enabled him to see beauty at Marsopolis, where beauty was not, now began to affect his whole life. All women became beautiful to him. He knew them by their voices and fitted their appearances to the sounds. It is a mean spirit indeed who will speak to a blind man other than in gentle friendliness. Scolds who had given their husbands no peace sweetened their voices to Rhysling." Love songs of the wanderers. The womanless men of space were the direct result of the fact that his conceptions were unsullied by tawdry truths. It mellowed his approach, changed his doggerel to verse. And another quote, "It was an easy life. Any spaceport was his home and any ship his private carriage. No skipper cared to refuse to lift the extra mass of blind Rhysling and his squeeze box. Finally, we are told of the poet's death, which occurs during an attempt of his to revisit his old Terran home. There is a malfunction of the atomic motors. Rhysling, though blind, still knows the inside of a ship so well that he manages to cope with the emergency, but in so doing he suffers a lethal dose of radiation. Not, however, before managing, in his last moments, to complete a poem that he'd been working on for years, The Green Hills of Earth. And so the story ends. We pray for one last landing on the globe that gave us birth. Let us rest our eyes on fleecy skies and the cool green hills of Earth. Right. So I'll throw it open to the gang for discussion. Nikki, do you want to?
As
Jet?
always, I shall begin. No problem. So, Robert E. Heinlein. I think out of the four pieces of his work that I have read, three of them have been um, quite enjoyable, for sure. So, with the exception for They, which I had my grievances with, as some of you may remember if you watched that episode, The Green Hills of Earth does not suffer from that. It it's akin to a burger from a really good joint, steeping with all the atmosphere and the tastes and tribulations of the human existence. It's a delight to eat. It's a fantastic thing to consume. Um, and you know you get done with it so quickly because it's only 10 pages, akin to a burger. You finish it and you're like, oh, that's it. That's it's all gone. I no longer have it in my hands. I read it again immediately after I had um, finished it, and a friend of mine who I discussed the story with, he directed me to a YouTube video, which maybe we could link here, where Nimoy, Mr. Nimoy, the man who played Spock, reads the short story, and by gods, is he good at it? I really recommend consuming the tale in that format as well. Um, Needless to say, I think this is a fantastical piece. It's very hard for me to find any sort of criticisms, as I am usually a fountain of them. Um, I'll start with the thing I enjoyed the least. It was still enjoyable, right? Like, but we'll go in acceleration. So I like the description that Heinlein gives towards individuals who are visually impaired, and I particularly found this it to be a stroke of genius to make this poet slash singer slash creator blind, because of course nobody in their right mind, anyone with a with enough sense, would treat them with some sort of respect and try to make sure that they're having an easier go of it, right? So people speaking to him more plainly or nicer makes a lot of sense. So I think that was a stroke of genius. And then juxtaposition to this captain, to this new breed of individual who is going to replace the class of the jetman, and having the conversation with him, it really put everything into perspective. It got not only us as the readers to completely understand the transition, but it also gave a glimpse of it for the character. And the character did not take that lightly. He decided, I'm going to have a fight with this guy, right? I'm not going to take this laying down. I'm going to make his life miserable, and I'm going to make him feel guilty. And did he do it? It was fantastic. Now, The other thing that I think is fantastic within this tale, I know I've said the word fantastic many times, but honestly, it's quite hard to find different words for a masterpiece, which is what I consider these 10 pages to be. Um, the atmosphere of hard life of a worker in a dangerous environment really struck true to me. Um, when every Friday, or this is gonna get somewhere, okay? Every Friday, my father and I we would go to a sauna. This is what I would do as a kid, all the way to adulthood until I left Moscow. And you get to meet a lot of different individuals there, politicians, workers, engineers, blue collar individuals, priests, rabbis, all sorts of people from any way and any walk of life. And right at the top of any sonnet, um, it says, right, these are the golden words, let's say, written there. In Banya, which is the name for sauna in my language, in Banya, all are equal. And people really treated that sense, that atmosphere, that you speak to all that come there, and you have a good time with anybody. It doesn't matter where they come from, but naturally, because they all come from different points of life and different points of view, they would tell different stories. And we had this old general, old man who, I will not say their name for anonymity, but they were in charge of a nuclear submarine. And before they were in charge of it, they used to be one of the engineers, used to be the guys on the bottom. And the tales he would tell us, quite mirthlessly, by the way. He wouldn't tell them like, "Oh, this horrific accident has occurred." He'd be like, "Oh yeah, we had like a leakage, and people were scrambling about and screaming murder as I was fixing it. Like, that's why I can't see so good out of this eye because something, spilled out of the engine." And I'm thinking, you're standing next to the nuclear reactor, and you're like, do 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 do, yeah, take this out, put this back in, whatever, you know.
Mm.
And this experience is exactly the way the Jetmen are portrayed in this story, and it rings so true to me. It was incredible, honestly. Reading and thinking, oh my god, I know people like this. I've heard stories like this. So yeah,
Mm.
for me, the authenticity really shine through. Even though we're talking about space, I can really see the human condition buried within the story. Yeah.
Mm.
Actually, what do you have to say?
Well, first of all, I found Rhysling to be a very colorful character, very engaging as well. It's definitely not a piece of cardboard. Um, I also quite enjoyed the how should I say this, the universe that Heinlein is building, the very rough, very dirty, very um, frontier like atmosphere that is built up from this particular short story. Now, I have to say though that if this is a standalone story and it never went further than this 10 pages, it wouldn't have worked so well for me because it is a very thin slice of a much like you, Nikki. It's way too quick, so it's not enough. But knowing that there's actually another body of work behind it that is set within the same universe gives it a different feeling. It would be more like part of a
Mm.
part of a dinner course, to continue your gourmet analogy. Uh, if it had been by itself, though, it would have suffered quite a bit. But as it is, I do like I very much enjoyed Rhysling as a character. Actually, I enjoyed all the characters within the book, even though most of them are just like have pretty much just cameo appearances. Uh, I also have to say I really admire people who could write some sort of lyrics, as I it's one area that I'm pretty bad at. So, and
Mm,
this short story is chock full of it. So yeah,
mm.
good story. Highly recommend for a rainy afternoon beside a hot cup of tea and some fruits and nuts, which is how I read it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I
I read
think
it
it.
after after eating a burger. If you couldn't tell.
Okay, yeah.
Did you
The
read it after eating a
Yeah.
burger?
mm,
That's amazing.
Sorry, Robert. What were you gonna say?
yeah is in occupies, I think, an interesting kind of midway position as far as the what XJ rightly calls the frontier atmosphere of space travel, on the kind of really, um, shall we say, uh, kind of, I don't know what to say, because I quite like Bradbury, but his rockets are absolutely ridiculous. So you could say the ridiculous Bradbury-esque rockets on the one end of the spectrum, and the highly convincing technical Arthur C. Clarke high-tech stuff at the other end. And Heinlein is kind of midway between. His spacemen are analogous to, I suppose, the stokers and the engineers on ocean-going vessels, only translated into space terms. Whereas Clarke has explains in some of his fiction that actually, when the space age really gets going, it'll be more analogous to aircraft, to the aircraft industry, rather than to actual real ships. So this is kind of occupying the middle ground, and although I don't think that it will be anything like Heinlein's rough and ready individualism, when it gets going, I think it'll be very, very highly organized and much more boring. But it's certainly nice to read the the saga. In fact, you can tell in the story itself. I think Nikki makes this point that right at the end, it's going to get more bureaucratized, and the culture is going to get less accommodating to individual talents. The captain who is trying to refuse Rhysling his last trip to Earth is rather like that, emblematic of that.
You will find that a lot of industries start as a frontier. So I could see it as
Mm,
starting this way and then sort of slowly transitioning. I think actually it's quite authentic, the way Highland speaks about it. I think it will start that way. Space
mm,
will be filled with these freelancers slash, go-getters, individuals who will be able to put their lives on the line, willing to do so for a good pay or a sense of adventure or for the desire to get away from the mundane. Um, it's always like that, and then it gets industrialized,
mm.
right?
Possibly, if private enterprise, with all the chaos and rough and readiness that implies, actually gets a foothold in space. And I suppose you could say that people like Elon Musk are trying to make it that way. But on the other hand, it's kind of hard to believe that we will get jetmen as the story goes. But you never know. You never know.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to come down on Arthur C. Clarke with that. Traveling in space is very, very a very, very difficult endeavor. It's very dangerous. There really is no space, so to speak, for the kind of elbow greasing that that is so colorfully written in Green Hills of Earth. I don't think, and I think the kind of accident we had at the very end with Green Hills of Earth that led to the ultimate demise of Rhysling before he even got to Earth would have meant the end of the whole ship, I think. In an actual space going vessel. It's a very hostile environment way up there.
Yeah, I fear you may be right.
Nevertheless, though, it is as you said, the way the atmosphere was painted makes it a much more exciting adventure story. That's just like it'd be awfully tedious and boring otherwise, I suppose. So it makes for a great read.
There's one thing I think I disagree with UXJ about, and that is that you were saying that the story.
All right. You disagree with me? Okay, let's take it off. No, I'm just kidding.
The story, you were thinking the stories would suffer if there weren't other stories in the background, whereas I think actually whether there were anything else in the future history or not, it would still be a perfect little gem of a story. For some reason, Heinlein in this particular tale, I suppose it's the kind of documentary approach he adopts in it, which is not like any of his other stories that I can think of. He indulges in special kind of skill which some writers have, some SF writers, in suggesting a lot more than he actually says. So you kind of feel a huge pulsating background to the tale without it actually being, there isn't space to show it all, but he hints at it all, and he sort of bamboozles the reader into believing that almost like feeling like you've read a 1,000-page novel when in fact it's just 10 pages.
Read on that point.
You got something there. I do agree that it does feel complete. I guess the issue I had with it was well, I wouldn't really say it's an issue, just that it wouldn't have made me finish the work, so to speak, because it felt a little bit experimental in the form of its delivery. Plus, also I just could not really grasp Rhysling's place in the story. It's a bit hard to explain what I mean, but it's it felt like a slice of life. I think the way you said it is best, actually. It's a very documentary article style written about somebody, and so it didn't really have much of a structure, so to speak. Yeah.
There's one very clever technique which Heinlein uses, which impressed me a lot when I reread it. I suppose I took it for granted my first few readings, but when I reread it for the podcast, I thought, hey, he's done a clever trick here. He started by emphasizing that Rhysling isn't like what you thought he was. And of course, we didn't think he was anything, because before you start reading the story, you never heard of him because he's a fictional character. It doesn't really exist. But this ploy of saying, he wasn't like the sanitized legend, immediately introduces a layer of depth to the story, because you suddenly you see that you're being introduced to somebody who's not like what other people thought he was. So you see the whole layers of the growing legend in that way, just implied.
I mean, either way, I do think Rhysling is a very colorful character, as I said before, and he's a well-crafted one too. Yeah, with many layers, like you said.
Right.
It's one of the shortest Heinlein stories. I can't think of offhand. I can't think of a shorter one. Probably are, but I can't think of a shorter one. Oh, he
So
wrote
besides, oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just realised he did write a very short, very even shorter story called Heil, which is as in Heil Hitler, which
Yeah.
it was written, I think, before the war, and it's about it's about a dictator who's not named, but a doctor performs an operation on his pineal gland and swaps the consciousness, which is kind of quite a good trick to do. Anyway, be that as it may, that's a even shorter story than this.
You were about to say something, Nikki. Regale
Yeah.
us.
So, so I wanted to ask you a question actually. So you said that you were impressed by the poetic side of the prose, by lyrics and so on and so forth. Now, besides the fact that you yourself can't do that so well as you yourself described, what else grabbed you? Did you feel like they were authentic enough that you could hear that in a song or read that in a collection of poems? And what exactly was it about them that was so well crafted for you?
Just the song lyrics or the story as a whole?
The lyrics.
No, the lyrics. Yeah, the lyric. There's also poems in there, not just the song, right?
Well, that probably goes a little further than am willing to put a foot down to the questions you asked. The truth is, I don't actually know if the lyrics that Heinlein wrote in this short story are good or not, because I don't know how they would feel if it is written musically, like how it would sound musically, like if it was sung, how it would feel, how it would touch our ears, so to speak. So without a score, without actually hearing the song, it's a bit hard. There is no meter to speak of just from the lyrics itself. I kind of have to imagine the lyrics, the rhythm and the tempo and the meter and stuff like that, which doesn't quite work for me. But I can see I can sort of see the poetry of the very first verse that we were introduced to, the fleecy skies of Earth and all that. There is a sense of poetry about it. Nothing quite like what's the guy's name in Flanders Field? I really like that poem.
Oh yeah.
The poppy one.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. Can't remember who it's by.
Yeah, that one. It has that description. It has that feel of describing something, a yearning, a kind of
Was it John McCrae?
I keep mixing him up with. He could well be, but I keep mixing him up with somebody else who the one that wrote Tommy Atkins and The Charge of the Light Brigade.
Well, yeah, it was the Canadian physician, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae.
Yeah, I know he was a physician. I always just keep mixing him.
I looked it up.
Right. So okay.
It's
Your
jumping.
Google Fu is level 9999.
999. That's right.
Yeah.
Just can't get to that 1,000.
Interesting you mentioned Charge of the Light Brigade because the extract we're given from Grand Canal with the 7-beat lines is like Locksley Hall by Tennyson. So you never know, maybe Heinlein was influenced by.
I have no doubt that Heinlein is a very well-read individual with influences he could pull from all over the place. I have respect for the intellect behind all these short stories we've been reading. Clearly, I'm gonna agree with Nikki with the authenticity of the rough and readiness of the men involved in the spacefaring trade. It really does have that feeling, and I have a sense that Heinlein probably talked to more than one of those guys before and was able to transpose directly the mannerisms and the kind of behavior that these people who are engineers and scrubs on nuclear submarine might have. Although I don't agree that if we actually have a spacefaring vessel, it'll be anything like that. But
No.
yeah, that feeling was very, very well portrayed. And I think he did his homework for sure.
Something very interesting about the story, comparatively to the last one we reviewed, The Guile of Sphere, it has characters. And these characters have actual, joys in life and ups and downs. They're not vehicles for the story. See how good it is to have those kind of things.
I mean, Rhysling is definitely a much more interesting and compelling character than Guel, for sure. Guel's just
Yeah.
Guel's
Even though Guile of Sphere did have, like, I could believe that this kid wanted to do this kind of stuff. That's kind of it. That's all I could believe. Right. Like just the main premise of the character, that he is cunning and that he wants to seek knowledge, right? Where Rhysling is, he's a full-rounded individual,
Yep.
who goes through a metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis.
Thank you. That he goes through that, whatever Robert said, and this metamorphosis creates a different character in the middle of the tale, and that's so great. It's so awesome to see a character grow in 10 pages, have it to be believable and engaging. I really enjoyed
I
that
mean,
part.
yeah, there really wasn't much change from the beginning to the end for Guel of Sphere. Internal change anyway. His external state absolutely changed.
Yeah. But Rhysling didn't need to put a new coat on in order to be cooler. So the the other aspect that I think is quite enjoyable about this is actually something that already Robert mentioned and disagreeing with XJ about, and it's the fact that I think, I completely disagree. I think this story can be self-contained. It doesn't really need anything else in order to propagate it. In fact, I got the feeling from it, the emotion that came through it. It was more than enough for me as a story. If there were no other tales uh, within this universe, I would have been more than satisfied.
Wait a minute. Does that mean you're not going to tell us how this can have a sequel?
He's dead. What am I gonna talk about?
Oh, this would be you're breaking a tradition, Nikki.
I mean, I can attempt to think of something while I still have some time, but to me, right, again, I'm sure that I'm coming back to a review from the previous week, but Guile of Sphere has no continuation, and it's an absolute tragedy because, like, nothing really gets resolved when it comes to what's gonna the interesting part of the tale ends the tale, right? The real juice, the nitty gritty. They're like, all right, now we've got this knowledge. What is Guile gonna do with it? Who knows? You know. And the Green Hills of Earth is completely opposite. It starts an arc, tells you don't know this guy the way I know him. Let me tell you. And it goes through the history of this individual, and it ends on this somber but powerful note that he did what had to be done one last time, and his life has ended.
Now I'm really curious what the who the guy who wrote the biography, so to speak, of Rhysling is. Do we ever
Who
know?
that guy is?
Yeah.
We don't, do we?
Dun dun dun. But he is a vehicle for the story. The real eyes are upon Rhysling, and there is a point to the story too. It's about human kindness. It's about overcoming obstacles, overcoming difficulties, never giving up, doing something with your life. Even when a man goes blind and he can no longer do his job, he becomes something else, and that something else um, creates him into this cult-like figure, right? Where people hear about him, learn of his poems, now read them, recite them, even after his death, right? So it's a very inspiring tale, even though the main character dies at the end.
Yeah, there's real challenges to write about a blind hero, isn't it? I mean, it takes tremendous ability to
Even more challenging to write a mute hero, I have to say.
really.
I feel like you're talking from personal experience, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
Oh my god, it's really tough. I wish I hadn't done that.
Well, you did. You tortured yourself. Nobody came to you actually and said he has to be mute.
Absolutely true. It's a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah.
No, you mean the long tail? It's a mute hero. That's what you mean. isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Well,
I actually can't think of any stories I've read where the main character is mute.
No, I can't either. Apart from that one, there's a great novel about someone who goes blind in the very early part of the novel. It's called Night Walk by Bob Shaw. I would strongly recommend that one. It's like the Green Hills of Earth. It's a story of triumph over obstacles. It's an amazing book.
Well, do we have anything else to say about the Green Hills of Earth? I feel like we've come to a natural conclusion on the story. It's quite enjoyable, but I think we all enjoyed it. So maybe that's why the conversation is a little bit short.
Yeah,
but we
There's
can
nothing to quarrel about, is there?
we
Nothing
can
to
decide.
quarrel about.
We can discuss a couple of things in the tale, and then give me some more time to maybe think of a sequel.
Okay.
So first, one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys is, so he plays an accordion. Do all of you know what an accordion is?
Yes, of
Right?
course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's not a very Western, let's say, musical instrument. It's
Is
a
it?
Slavic one.
Really?
No, I mean it's like Russians, Romanians.
This might be my prejudice speaking, but every time I picture an accordion, I always picture a Frenchman playing it.
Really interesting.
I don't know where
Does he have a mustache and is
Yes,
he like
that's
black and white and he's wearing the stripes in your mind?
not black and white, but he definitely has a mustache, and then he has a tall hat. I don't know why, and he has suspenders. Every time I think about a accordion player, that is the image that comes to my mind. I don't know. Is that maybe it was Charlie Chaplin? Maybe.
I mean, Charlie Chaplin definitely plays upon it, but to me, it's it's a very interesting piece of equipment to pick for music, right? He doesn't play guitar, right? He's not cool. He doesn't play the piano. He's not classical. He plays an accordion. And that really adds something for me because when I hear an accordion, it's like, right, like it's all these like somber but open-ended notes, and I try to imagine the green hills of Earth, um, being sang by somebody with an accordion playing as an accomplice, and I kind of can't. To me, the Green Hills of Earth is like played with the somber notes of a guitar, like dun da 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 dum, dun da 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 dum, dun dun, something like that.
That's
It's not
interesting.
played by with an accordion. So, what do you guys think? What the hell is he doing here? What is Heinlein trying to do with the accordion? Why
Pa-
did he pick? He could pick so many other instruments, but he picks an accordion.
the parsimonious answer is that he didn't do quite as much homework when it comes to music as he did the crewman.
Mm.
Okay,
Well,
but let's take away that boring answer because I don't think that's it actually.
Really?
What? Yeah, not at all. Yeah,
doesn't
I think there's a
an accordion has a sort of twang to it, or it can do, can't it? And that would be quite good for the Green Hills of Earth. I
yeah.
reckon.
Okay, that could make sense. Yeah, I don't think Robert E. Heinlein didn't do his homework on this.
A, not E. You're getting mixed up with Robert E. Howard.
Yeah, I'm well because I want to read Conan. Is what's happening here. Yeah, Robert A. Heinlein. My apologies.
Mm.
And to me, I think he is trying to say something with the sound of an accordion here. That's why he's picked it, right? Um, when it comes to the written verse of the lyrics, they're perfect, right? So I can say that as an individual who worked a lot with music, right? Like I played on a trumpet for 5 years.
Mm.
The these notes, the hitting of the notes on the words, they like I can see them. I can see how this would be played, but I can't see it with an accordion. However, there is like maybe, right, and just maybe that this is played in a way where the accordion sounds, and then there's like a long note being taken, and the note is sort of like passed around the accordion itself, like as he speaks the words, and then puts accents on the words with the notes, right? So that's one way I could see this kind of happening, maybe the only way. So like there's a lot of instrumental prowess in the middle of the verses, right? Like complex sounds, and then when it actually comes to saying the poems, they're said slowly with the accordion much lower in volume and in complexity. So that
Mm.
way, maybe it works. But I couldn't come up with something that made more sense than this one, and I don't know if how, because I never played on an accordion, to be honest, and I don't
Mm.
really know how the instrument itself works. When it comes to ins and outs of it. But that's the one way
Mm.
that I could see it happening.
I
Mm.
mean, I don't know if I would go that far into the explanation. To be honest, I feel like maybe he chose the accordion instead of the guitar just because certain some instruments have certain sort of image attached to it, as you yourself alluded to. Like if you play the piano, you're very classical. Play the guitar, you're dashing and romantic. I don't know what sort of image you have if you play violin, but an accordion has a very street musician feel to it. I feel
Mm.
like a busker, and I think maybe that was more the case he was going for. Like the accordion fits in very well with Rhysling's personality.
Mm. And also, he couldn't really lug a piano around with him.
exactly.
Right, but it's the future. You could have a mini piano or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I mean, like a he described Rhysling as a troubadour, and a troubadour is a person that
Troubadour.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my mistake.
Troubadour.
Troubadour.
Sorry.
A troubadour.
Sorry.
A troubadour is a traveling musician. He brings his instrument wherever he goes. He's a bit more rough and ready than even a bard, which has a much different feeling.
Troubadour sounds to me like an old, forgotten, ancient Norse god. The Troubadour, he comes.
Well, there is a Norse god called Balder, so
Yeah, maybe that's why. And Thor sounds like Thor, Troubadour, right?
well,
Maybe that's where the association
whatever.
is.
So anyway, this traveling.
I'm not making fun of you. I just
This
thought it
traveling
was a funny thing.
this traveling musician has this traveling musician trope has a specific identity with it, and I think the instrument he lugs around also speaks to that. So.
Yeah, sure. You could see him. Yeah, maybe it was also a visual idea, right? Like a guy with a hat on the street with the accordion. I can definitely see that in my mind.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was part of Rysling's image as a character that he has to have an accordion, really.
Okay.
It's the thing that fits best.
And then there's one more thing that I think is quite interesting. Like a detail in the story. And that is to do with Rysling's rise to fame. Because there are certain moments where he doesn't even go down to Earth. He sort of has these recordings nonchalantly inside a space train or whatever, right? Where he doesn't really go down to the offices or signs any contracts. And I wonder, like, does that mean he didn't get any money for what he did? He just sort of signed off these rights and they played that stuff on the space radio or whatever, right? Like, I know that's not what the story is about, but I'm just fascinated to think about, like, okay, so if we're trying to analyze that particular scene, that particular transaction, let's say, what was he being taken advantage of? Like, what was going on there? Right?
I think his first published work was published the week he died, or something like that. It seems I seem to remember it says so. It came out just when he died, so maybe he made his living just by passing the hat round, as it were.
But how did he become a living statue, a living legend in space if this first thing was published after he died? Because they say that.
Yeah, because
he was a folk troubadour.
spacemen,
Yeah.
they congregate in these bars, don't they? And everybody hears about him. That's why he gets free passage on all these ships. Everybody knows him. I suppose there aren't that many spacemen, you see, so it's possible to know everybody.
Oh, maybe that's the case. I assume that he, like a bunch of stuff that he recorded, they talk about recording his stuff, was on the space train, and people recorded it from basically the coupe, the area, the room which he was in. Right, because it talks about, before it goes into like his last voyage towards Earth, it talks about like he was several times close to Earth, but he was never there because of the super New York bullshit, whatever, right? And they talk about recording his stuff. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just confused.
Well, that actually brings to mind something that happened that was described right in the beginning. Like the jetmen never took pay. They got shares in the.
They preferred shares, and they would only be paid on basis if and when.
Yeah, so it feels to me like the the entire class of people called jetmen and spacemen doesn't seem to be too concerned about monetary compensation at all.
No, they just want
The
a short
adventure, I suppose.
run. Yeah, it's like prospectors probably enjoy prospecting quite apart from actually hoping to find any gold. They just like wandering around looking for it.
Perhaps, yeah. Well, I mean, it right from the beginning, Heinlein painted this spacemen out to be people who have different ideas about compensation, I suppose.
Hmm. Hmm. It works in the
Regardless,
story. Yeah.
yeah, it works in the story, and you can like if you were to sit down, you could really paint the dots from which profession did he take what, right? So this idea of payment comes from miners and prospectors. The idea of taking risks are those individuals who work in faraway places, akin to people on a nuclear submarine or somewhere in the Arctic and stuff like that, where you have to take daring, um, you know, daring action in a moment of need, so on and so forth. It is very well researched, right? And it paints a picture of a different reality, so to speak, which I think is what best sci-fi does. It doesn't just tell you where we will be in the future. It sort of paints it in a way where you can link it to what was in the past and believe it. There you go. All right. So
Right, yeah.
yeah,
Tell us
yeah,
your
yeah.
sequel
Huh?
idea.
Yeah. I mean, I have a few words to say to you actually, but after we finish the recording, they won't be pretty. Okay. In the sequel to the Green Hills of Earth, it's called the Red Hills of Mars. No, I'm kidding. No, the story would be about the last song written by Rhysling that wasn't published, that somebody knows of. It's written somewhere, written by somebody else because the guy was blind, he couldn't write it. And this researcher, and we get to meet the researcher from part one. We get to meet him, we get to understand him, how he got all of this information, and we learn of his voyage of trying to get this information, this song. And it's sort of a story of combined happenstances that occur to him as he goes to places, goes to ships where Rhysling used to reside in, areas in which he was famous in, bars in which he made his coin for living. And the more he goes through it, the more he realizes that something isn't right. Whoever gave him this tip wants him to go on this goose chase, right? Because some things match, but some of the clues to those places, but other clues don't match. And so every time he thinks he's getting closer to the thing, he misses it by just a millisecond, or he figures out this is a poem that has already been made before and shown before, so it's not the lost piece. And then in the final parts of the story, he gets so close. He sees the writing, right? And there's this whole situation where this giant ship, the first ship that Rhysling was ever on, is being decommissioned, and he's running through the holes trying to get to his bunk. He finally realized all of it, and then it cuts to a different scene where he's presenting the tale to the public, and then he writes in his memoirs that he never made it, but he couldn't disappoint the public, so he wrote this poem himself. There you go.
I applaud that attempt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Limited time. I was given limited time.
It would it doesn't sound like a Heinlein story, but I could
Well,
totally see.
actually, I don't know if you
I
noticed.
could totally
Not
see.
Robert E. Heinlein.
I could totally see it happening though. Yeah.
Robert A. Heinlein, sorry. Not Robert A. Heinlein. This is Nikita D. Zuo.
Why? You could do it like me. Just say Heinlein and forget about Robert, the Robert part.
I could never forget about Robert. In more ways than one. There's 3 Roberts that I'll never forget in this beautiful world of ours. So yeah, I think now that we've tortured me enough, let's talk about the final scores. For me, I'm going to channel my inner Gibson, and I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10, an absolute 10 out of 10.
That's not quite channeling enough of the Gibson channel. You should be giving it 11 out of. Yeah, you should be giving it.
I can't channel him just that much. I am also a financial advisor. Okay, so I can't break the laws of mathematics for fun. So it's a 10 out of 10.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That I'm a financial advisor?
No, I didn't know that. No.
Oh God, you were living in a happy world before you found out that one. Really, I didn't never told you. I thought I did. My apologies. Yeah, I'm a business consultant, a financial advisor. Hi, here's my card. No, what do you give it, Robert? What's the?
I'm going to be boring here and say 10 out of 10, same as you. I mean,
all right. Hey, this time, I'll no comment from me.
no quarreling this week.
No, this week no quarreling.
The normal service will probably be resumed.
Yeah, the fight will continue. You know, it's an infinite war. Yeah, exactly. Actually, what about you? What is your score?
8 out of 10. Yeah.
8 out of 10. Okay. Why 8? What's the 2 missing points?
Just a little bit. It's not quite my cup of tea to so heavily focus on one slice of life in fantasy or science fiction series. I'm not sure if that came out the way I wanted it to, but I just feel like the Green Hills of Earth, just this particular short story seems to be very narrowly focused on one, and it's not quite my cup of tea. I kind of want to hear about the rest of the world. That George R.R. Martin story is also narrowly focused on one character, not the first one we did, Hero, the second one, I can't remember the name. The one with
This Tower of Ashes.
This Tower of Ashes. That actually, even though it's narrowly focused on one character, but there's a lot of peripheral expansion that made it more interesting to me, like the forest and stuff. This one is not quite really in my courtyard. But having said all that, Rhysling is a very, very good character. The whole story was well written, well paced. So, and I didn't dislike reading it. And it made a pleasant afternoon to pass. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, dear listeners, dear viewers, enjoyers of the podcast, thank you so much for coming this week. I hope you enjoyed the discussion on the tale. And
we need to discuss.
Yes,
the feedback.
yes, yeah, the feedback. That's right. Sorry, my absolute bad. Never mind. We'll roll that back. XJ, what's going on with the feedback you got from the publisher?
I will read
From the magazine.
verbatim what they told me.
Oh God. All right,
Okay.
Here we go.
I'm gonna skip the first sentence. Unfortunately, it's not quite right for us. While I liked how the narrator's personality came through so clearly in his thoughts and actions, I found some of the description, especially at the beginning, slowed down the story when I wanted instead to be immediately understanding what the situation and the stakes were.
That sounds like something some guy said.
the pacing. So,
Yeah.
Actually, I wrote back an email asking them to expand on the comment, because there's several ways you can. There are a few ways you can. I took the comment to mean.
Yeah.
So first of all, maybe they don't like. So first, this is a different editor from the first one. So it's a completely different person, and that has some bearings. One is this second editor didn't quite like the world building, and found that it slowed everything down. The second is you could see the comment as being in a magazine, and they have readers to interest. You want to have a situation where you write the story with the most captivating part right in the first paragraph. So an example would be, to go back to the Horus Heresy. I was there when the what was the first line? I was there when the Emperor killed.
When Horus killed the Emperor.
When Horus.
I was there when the core struck down the Emperor.
Yeah. So you get a line like that is immediately grabbing to the audience of Warhammer for sure. And so if you're in the business of magazine, you might want to be in a situation where every first paragraph that starts out, you grab the reader's attention, and that could be one of the things that this editor meant, or they could possibly mean that they wanted the stakes. And here's the thing that I don't want to jump to conclusion on, and that is, what did the editor mean by the stakes? Because from my perspective as the person who wrote the story, the stakes could mean a different thing to the reader, right? And so I wrote back an email. I haven't gotten a reply yet on what exactly the editor meant, and it could be a issue of pacing. Like it could also just be a issue of pacing. But my thoughts on this is depending on how it is, how the follow-up reply came back to me, if they reply to me, I might find it not acceptable, to be honest. Like so this is one of those things that, as a professional artist, it's a little bit difficult to take, mostly because it felt like a moving target. So the first comment was, the first feedback I got was that they wanted to be more to be able to see from the point of view of the characters, to get really more in tune. Now, I was actually expecting the rejection to be more like, hey, a first-person narrator with no development on all the other characters is a little bit of a cop-out, don't you think? And so we want more perspective from other characters. That was one possible rejection, I thought. The other was like, this is way too fairy tale for our liking, which is actually on their website. And I thought that would be another avenue of rejection. This pacing thing, while I don't disagree with their analysis, but it's a completely different one from the first comment. So it does make it feel like trying to hit a moving target, like what precisely to shoot for. Okay.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So what are you gonna do if the response is if the response is hold on, if the response is like, right, we're like basically ready to accept it, but you gotta fix that
Well,
opening.
I mean, so first of
basically.
all, there's no chance that they will accept this. Their policy is that uh, the first rejection is a final rejection, and they won't accept it even if I rewrote the story and send the same thing to them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's their policy. So there's no way they are going to accept this, right?
Then let me reward this.
Okay.
It would be like if they say like, okay, the story is fine, but the beginning is front loaded. Like, what's your response to that? Well,
so
you'd be like, okay, fair enough, or like, nah, actually, I don't agree.
So as we discussed in the podcast itself, I do agree that the pacing is off because I was trying to do too much. The only thing that will make me say it's time to part ways with this particular magazine is if they tell me they don't like the world building. And if that is the case, then I'm thinking to myself, we are not, our interests don't lie in the same area, because for me, fantasy and science fiction, like the world itself, is a main character. So if you were to tell me I'm writing a short story in a fantasy or science fiction universe and I can't do world building, we are not our interests diverge here. It'd be like me trying to write a romance novel, which I have no interest in. So I think that is a legitimate parting of ways, because we're not our interest just diverges,
Yeah,
but
I understand what you're saying.
yeah, but if they say it's a pacing thing, they want the stakes, whatever the stakes happen to be right up there in front within the first paragraph or so. Yeah, then that is something that can be worked with. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what they say. Get an additional response.
But yeah, but I don't know. I would still be interested to hear what you guys think about the comment itself. What we have.
I think I made it pretty clear what I think, right? I agree if it means like my criticism, right? If that's what they're saying. Otherwise, I agree with you that like this moving of the goal post is a bit, unprofessional.
I don't know if, I mean, so from this reply, we can see very clearly that there is more than one editor on the board, and it's like it then, depending on how many.
Well, hold on, is it signed differently? My apologies.
It's signed differently.
It's
signed differently.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
You didn't say their name, so.
I'm trying not to.
Yeah, I know, but you could have said like, okay, and it's a different editor because it's a different name. Because I didn't get that from the comment.
Okay, so if there are more than one editors, then writing a story that gets accepted is a lot like shooting in a fish in a barrel. Shooting into a barrel, hoping to hit a fish. So then it becomes a different thing. Yeah. If there is one consistent editor and they have a consistent policy, and then it's more a matter of writing to fit their audience. But this feels a lot like, depending on how many editors there are on their board, it really could be a matter of just having somebody who liked it, and that's way harder to achieve than having a clear goal to shoot towards.
The trouble is, some editors are really outstandingly thick, aren't they? Because just think about what we know is that some of Lovecraft's best stories were rejected. Even some Conan stories by Howard were rejected.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's if it is a matter of taste, like being accepted into a magazine is a matter of taste for the editor, then it's I would say anybody who got their stuff rejected should not feel bad, because it could just be that it's not the kind of story that particular editor who was reading your story liked. And so my next step is to send it to other magazines, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I do advise you to give me some time to look at that beginning before you do that. That is my advice. Professional
Wow.
advice.
All right. Let's see what you come up with then.
You got it. I'm in your corner, XJ.
All right, man.
I'm not fighting against you.
Oh,
I'm
you're
fighting
not.
for you.
That makes it a little bit less interesting, but I thank you for your
All
support.
right, we're fighting then.
All right, man.
Forget what I said. All right.
Okay,
Robert,
well-
you be the judge.
Okay, so that ends this particular section of the submission story, and we have come to the end of this particular podcast. And if you enjoyed our company, then like and subscribe, and join us again on the next episode.
Thank you very much for coming, guys.